Commander Veltar walked slowly through the massive control room of the Zephyrian space station. The walls were covered with thousands of tiny lights, each one representing a different world in the galaxy. For over 3,000 years, his people had been exploring space and making lists of every smart creature they could find. "Sir, we have finished checking the outer edge of the galaxy again," said Lieutenant Kesra as she approached him. She carried a data pad with the latest results from their deep space scanners. Veltar took the pad and looked at the numbers. 847 different smart species. All of them followed the same basic pattern. They started simple, grew smarter, built cities, then eventually reached out to the stars. His people had seen it happen hundreds of times before. "Any surprises this time?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. There were never any surprises. "Nothing unusual, Commander. All species are developing exactly as our science predicted. The Thorian Empire is still expanding slowly in Sector 7. The Mindari Collective just discovered how to travel faster than light last month. Everything is normal." Veltar nodded and continued walking past the giant displays. His people, the Zephyrians, were proud of being the best explorers in the galaxy. They had the most advanced ships, the smartest scientists, and the most complete records of every living world. Other species came to them when they wanted to know about the galaxy. "Wait," Kesra said, stopping to look at one of her instruments. "There is something strange here. Our deep space sensors are picking up some odd signals from a small system near the edge of Sector 12. Veltar moved closer to look at her screen. The display showed a small yellow star with several planets around it. The third planet from the star was blue and green, covered mostly with water. "What kind of signals?" he asked. "Electromagnetic waves. Radio signals. Very primitive stuff. The patterns suggest the creatures there have just learned to send messages through space, but they are still very basic. Our computers say they probably discovered electricity only a few hundred years ago." Veltar studied the data more carefully. The signals were indeed very simple, nothing like the complex communications used by truly advanced species. The energy readings showed the creatures were still burning fossil fuels for power and had not even learned to split atoms properly yet. "Have our science teams looked at this world before?" he asked. Kesra checked her records. "Yes, sir. We sent a survey probe there about 2,000 years ago. The report said the planet had simple life forms, mostly water creatures and some land animals that walked on 4 legs. No signs of intelligence at all. And now our sensors detect organized electromagnetic signals, some atomic energy, and what looks like small metal objects flying around the planet. The creatures seem to have developed quickly, but they are still very primitive compared to other species we monitor." Veltar looked at the readings again. The third planet, the inhabitants seemed to call it Earth, showed all the basic signs of a species just beginning to understand technology. They were probably still fighting wars with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. Most likely they had not even figured out how to work together as one planet yet. "What does our xenobiology department think about these creatures?" he asked. Dr. Zethrin examined the data yesterday. He says they appear to be mammals that walk on 2 legs. They seem to live in large groups and build structures out of metal and stone. Based on their energy signatures, he estimates they might achieve basic space travel in another 500 or 600 years, if they do not destroy themselves first. Veltar almost smiled. It was always the same story. Young species always went through a dangerous period where they discovered atomic power and advanced weapons before they learned wisdom. Many destroyed themselves during this phase. Only the smart ones survived to join the galactic community. "Are they dangerous to anyone else?" he asked. "Not at all, sir. Their most powerful weapons could barely damage our oldest scout ships. They do not even know that other intelligent life exists in the galaxy. Dr. Zethrin says they probably think they are alone in the universe." That was normal too. Most young species believed they were the only smart creatures in existence until they were contacted by more advanced civilizations. It was actually better that way. It prevented them from panicking or doing something foolish. "Should we add them to our official monitoring list?" Kesra asked. Veltar thought for a moment. The creatures of Earth showed some promise, but they were still incredibly primitive. It would be centuries before they developed enough to be interesting to the galactic community. His people had limited resources for monitoring, and there were more important species to watch. "No," he decided. "Mark them as a pre-sentient development case. We will check on them again in a few hundred years and see if they have made progress. For now, they are not worth our attention." Kesra made a note in her files and moved on to the next report. The blue planet called Earth disappeared from their priority list, filed away as just another ordinary world with ordinary creatures taking their first baby steps toward intelligence. Veltar continued his walk through the control room, satisfied that the galaxy remained predictable and well-organized. His people had seen every possible type of intelligent life, and they had catalogued every pattern of development. There were no surprises left in the universe, or so he believed. Far away, on the small blue planet, the creatures called humans continued their daily lives, completely unaware that they had just been dismissed as unimportant by the galaxy's most advanced civilization. They had no idea that this casual dismissal would soon prove to be the biggest mistake in galactic history. War Marshal Thekron stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the tactical display showing the small blue planet ahead. His massive fleet of 200 warships hung in space like deadly shadows, ready to begin another routine conquest for the Korthak Dominion. "Sir, we have completed our scans of the target world," reported Captain Morgak, his second-in-command. "The intelligence reports were correct. These humans are even more primitive than we expected." Thekron studied the data flowing across his screens. The third planet of this system showed all the signs of a typical developing species, thousands of separate nations constantly fighting each other, crude nuclear weapons that could barely scratch paint off a Korthak scout ship, and flying machines that moved slower than his supply shuttles. "How many of these creatures live on the planet?" he asked. "Approximately 8 billion, scattered across several large landmasses. They have built many cities, but their technology is laughably weak. Their strongest weapons use chemical explosives and metal projectiles. They have no energy shields, no plasma weapons, and no faster-than-light travel." Thekron nodded with satisfaction. This would be easier than their last conquest, where the enemy had at least possessed basic laser weapons. The humans were still using gunpowder and petroleum fuel, technologies the Korthak had abandoned thousands of years ago. "What about their military organization?" he asked. "Completely fragmented, sir. They have no unified planetary defense. Instead, they maintain separate armies for each nation, and many of these nations actively hate each other. Our intelligence suggests they spend more time fighting among themselves than preparing for external threats." This was perfect. Divided enemies were always the easiest to defeat. The Korthak had conquered dozens of worlds using the same simple strategy: destroy the major population centers first, then mop up the scattered survivors who no longer had any central command structure. "Begin the attack," Thekron ordered. Standard cleansing protocol. Target their largest cities first, then their military bases. I want complete planetary surrender within 2 standard days. The Korthak fleet moved toward Earth like a storm of death. Their ships were massive, each one larger than the biggest human buildings. Advanced cloaking technology had hidden their approach until they were already in orbit around the planet. On Earth, people in major cities around the world looked up to see the sky suddenly filled with enormous dark shapes. In New York, millions of people stopped on the streets and pointed at the alien vessels hovering above their skyscrapers. In London, air traffic controllers frantically tried to contact the mysterious aircraft on their radios. In Tokyo, emergency sirens began wailing as government officials realized this was not a movie or a joke. "Sir, the humans are attempting to communicate with us," reported the communications officer aboard Thekron's flagship. "They are sending radio messages asking who we are and what we want." Thekron laughed coldly. "Do not respond. Begin the bombardment immediately. Show them what happens to worlds that stand in the path of the Korthak Dominion." The first plasma beams lanced down from the alien ships like lightning from hell. Where they touched the Earth, buildings simply vanished in flashes of superheated energy. Entire city blocks disappeared in seconds, leaving only glowing craters behind. In New York, the Empire State Building melted like ice cream under the alien weapons. Times Square became a lake of molten glass. Central Park was turned into a smoking hole in the ground. Similar destruction rained down on every major city across the planet as the Korthak methodically erased humanity's greatest achievements. Human military forces tried desperately to fight back. Fighter jets scrambled from air bases around the world, firing missiles at the alien ships. The weapons exploded harmlessly against Korthak energy shields, causing no damage at all. Tank divisions rolled out of their bases only to be vaporized by plasma beams before they could fire a single shot. "The humans are attempting to use nuclear weapons against us," reported the tactical officer, watching his screens with amusement. "Let them," Thekron replied. "It will save us the trouble of destroying those weapons later." Several nations launched their most powerful nuclear missiles at the alien fleet. The warheads detonated against the Korthak shields in brilliant flashes of light, but when the explosions cleared, the alien ships remained completely undamaged. Weapons that could destroy entire cities barely scratched the paint on Korthak hulls. Within 6 hours, every major city on Earth was either destroyed or burning. Government centers, military bases, communication networks, all had been systematically eliminated. Billions of humans died in the first day of the attack, unable to understand or fight back against technology thousands of years more advanced than their own. Resistance has collapsed, sir, Captain Morgak reported. We are detecting scattered military units in remote areas, but they pose no threat. Most human governments have ceased to function. Thekron watched the data streams showing the devastation below. Smoke columns rose from hundreds of destroyed cities. Refugee streams clogged the roads as survivors fled toward rural areas. It was exactly the same pattern they had seen on dozens of other conquered worlds. Begin landing operations, he ordered. Deploy ground forces to secure the remaining population centers. I want mining operations to begin within 10 days. This planet has excellent mineral resources that the Dominion can use. Thousands of Korthak dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere, carrying soldiers and equipment to begin the occupation phase. The war, if it could even be called that, was effectively over. Another primitive species had been crushed beneath the might of the Dominion. Thekron prepared his victory report for transmission back to Korthak High Command. It would be a short message, just another routine conquest of a backward world that had offered no real resistance. The humans had proven even weaker than expected. He had no idea that his easy victory was about to become the costliest mistake in Korthak military history. James Mitchell crouched behind the twisted remains of a burned car, watching 3 alien soldiers walk slowly down what used to be Main Street in the small town of Millfield, Colorado. 3 weeks had passed since the sky had filled with fire and death, and James was still alive when most of the world was not. The former Army Ranger had been teaching a wilderness survival course to a group of college students in the Rocky Mountains when the attack began. From their remote campsite, they had watched the distant glow of Denver burning on the horizon. By the time James hiked down to check on the city 2 days later, there was nothing left but smoking craters and twisted metal. The college students had panicked and tried to reach their families in other cities. James had warned them to stay hidden, but they would not listen. One by one, they had left the safety of the mountains to search for loved ones. None of them had returned. Now James was alone, and he preferred it that way. Alone, he could move quietly. Alone, he could survive. He studied the 3 alien soldiers through his binoculars. They walked like they owned the world, which James supposed they did now. Their armor was black and silver, covering them from head to toe. They carried weapons that looked like rifles but glowed with blue energy. James had seen what those weapons could do. They turned people into ash in less than a second. The aliens were tall, maybe 7 feet, with long arms and legs. Their faces were hidden behind helmets, but James had found the body of one killed in a helicopter crash the week before. Under the armor, they looked almost human, except for gray skin and large black eyes. They were not the monsters from movies, they were just soldiers doing a job, which somehow made them more frightening. James watched the patrol move past his hiding spot and disappear around a corner. Then he waited another 30 minutes to make sure they were really gone. Patience had kept him alive when speed had killed everyone else. He had learned to think like a hunter instead of a soldier. Moving carefully from shadow to shadow, James made his way to the small grocery store he had been watching for days. The aliens had already taken most of the useful supplies, but they were not interested in camping gear and hunting equipment. James filled his backpack with energy bars, water purification tablets, and anything else that might help him survive another week. As he worked, James thought about what he had learned in 3 weeks of hiding and watching. The aliens were efficient but predictable. They followed the same patrol routes every day. They set up camps in obvious places like schools and government buildings. They relied completely on their technology and never seemed to expect any real resistance. Most importantly, they were not as invincible as they wanted everyone to believe. James had found pieces of their equipment scattered around crash sites where their flying machines had been brought down by lucky missile hits. The technology was incredibly advanced, but it was still just technology. It could be broken, studied, and maybe even copied. James finished gathering supplies and slipped out the back of the store. He was about to head back to his hidden camp in the mountains when he heard voices coming from the next street. Human voices, speaking English. He crept closer and saw 5 people hiding behind an overturned truck, 3 men, a woman, and a teenage boy. They looked hungry and scared, and they were arguing in loud whispers about where to find food. James almost walked away. Other people meant complications, noise, and dangerous mistakes. But something about the teenager reminded him of his nephew back in Texas, and before he could stop himself, he was approaching their hiding spot. "You are making too much noise," he said quietly, causing all 5 people to jump and spin toward him. "The alien patrols will hear you from 2 blocks away." The oldest man, maybe 50 years old with gray hair, stepped forward. "Who are you? Are you military?" "I used to be," James replied. "Name is James Mitchell. Right now I am just trying to stay alive, same as you." "We have been hiding here for 4 days," the woman said. "We ran out of food yesterday. The aliens destroyed everything." James looked at the group more carefully. They were all thin and exhausted, wearing clothes that had not been washed in weeks. The teenager was trying to act brave, but James could see the fear in his eyes. "The aliens do not destroy everything," James told them. "They leave behind things they do not understand or need. You just have to know where to look and how to move without being seen." "Can you help us?" asked one of the younger men. James thought about it for a long moment. More people meant more risk, but it also meant more eyes to watch for danger and more hands to carry supplies. And if he was going to do more than just survive, if he was going to fight back, he would need help eventually. "I have a camp in the mountains," he said finally. "It is hidden and safe. I can take you there, but you have to follow my rules exactly. No arguments, no noise, no stupid risks. If you cannot handle that, you are better off on your own." The 5 people looked at each other, then back at James. The gray-haired man nodded. "We will do whatever you say." James shouldered his backpack and checked his watch. The next alien patrol would come through in 2 hours, giving them enough time to reach the edge of town before dark. "Then let us go," he said, leading them toward the mountains. "I have a lot to teach you about staying alive in the new world." As they walked through the ruins of human civilization, James began planning. Survival was good, but it was not enough. Soon, very soon, he was going to start teaching the aliens that humans were much more dangerous than they had assumed. 6 months after the invasion, James Mitchell knelt beside a captured alien communication device in his mountain hideout. The small group of 5 survivors he had rescued had grown into something much larger. 43 people now lived in the network of caves and hidden shelters he had built throughout the Colorado Rockies. "James, we are getting another signal," called out Lisa Thompson, a former radio technician who had become his communications expert. "It is coming from somewhere in what used to be London." James put on the headphones and listened carefully. The voice speaking through the static was female, with a British accent, and she was using the same coded language that resistance groups had started developing across the world. "This is Rebecca Stone calling any American resistance groups. We have successfully captured an alien supply convoy and recovered advanced weapons. Looking to share tactical information with organized groups. Please respond if you receive this message." James smiled and picked up the microphone. After months of feeling alone, he was learning that humans everywhere were refusing to give up. Small groups of survivors were organizing, fighting back, and most importantly, learning from their enemies. "Rebecca, this is James Mitchell in Colorado. We have been monitoring alien communications for 3 months. We need to talk." Over the next hour, James exchanged information with Rebecca and her group in London. She had been a captain in the British Army before the invasion and had managed to gather nearly 60 survivors in the ruins of the city. Like James, she had discovered that the aliens were not as prepared for guerrilla warfare as they were for conventional battles. "The bloody aliens expect us to roll over and die," Rebecca's voice crackled through the radio. "They have no idea how to fight an enemy that refuses to stand still and be shot at." James had learned the same thing. The Korthak soldiers were deadly in direct combat, but they became confused and ineffective when facing hit-and-run tactics. They would send large patrols to investigate attacks, leaving other areas poorly defended. They relied too heavily on their technology and did not adapt quickly to changing situations. "What kind of weapons have you captured?" James asked. "Their plasma rifles, some kind of explosive devices, and best of all, we managed to get our hands on one of their communication systems. My engineer, Michael Harper, has been taking it apart and figuring out how it works." This was exactly what James had been hoping for. His own group had captured several alien weapons, and his people were getting better at using them. But understanding how the technology worked was the key to fighting back effectively. "Michael, are you listening?" James spoke into the microphone. A different voice answered, younger and excited. "Yes, I am here. James, you will not believe what we have discovered. These alien weapons are incredibly advanced, but they work on principles we can understand. The power cells can be recharged using modified car batteries. The targeting systems can be fooled using simple mirror tricks. And their communication devices use frequencies that our old military radios can tap into. Over the following weeks, James coordinated with resistance groups around the world. There was Maria Santos in what remained of Mexico City, leading 200 survivors in the subway tunnels. David Chen in the ruins of Sydney had figured out how to make crude copies of alien grenades using captured technology and household chemicals. Sarah Williams in the Canadian wilderness had developed new tactics for ambushing alien patrol vehicles. Each group had learned different lessons about their enemies. The aliens were strong, but they had weaknesses. They expected humans to behave like other species they had conquered, to surrender after losing their major cities and governments. They were not prepared for an enemy that became more dangerous after being defeated. James began coordinating larger operations. Instead of just raiding for supplies, the resistance groups started targeting alien infrastructure. They destroyed communication towers, sabotaged mining equipment, and ambushed supply convoys with increasing frequency and skill. The aliens are requesting more troops, Lisa reported after intercepting another enemy transmission. Their commanders are telling their superiors that resistance is much stronger than expected. James studied the tactical map he had drawn on the cave wall. Red pins marked known alien positions. Blue pins showed resistance strongholds. Yellow pins indicated successful attacks against enemy forces. The map told a story that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. Humans were winning battles against a superior enemy. The key was adaptation. Every time the aliens changed their tactics, humans learned and responded faster. When the Korthak started using heavier armor on their patrols, the resistance developed new ways to attack from long range. When the aliens began varying their routes, human scouts learned to predict their movements anyway. Most importantly, every piece of alien technology that fell into human hands was studied, copied, and improved. James's people were not just using captured weapons anymore, they were building new ones based on alien designs but adapted for human use. "James, we have a problem," called out Tom Bradley, his best scout. Large alien force approaching from the east. At least 50 soldiers with heavy vehicles. James grabbed his modified plasma rifle and headed for the cave entrance. This was the largest force the aliens had ever sent against his position. They were finally taking the resistance seriously. "Everyone to defensive positions," he ordered. "This is what we have been preparing for." As his people moved to their hidden fighting positions, James felt a grim satisfaction. 6 months ago, 43 humans with captured weapons would never have considered fighting 50 alien soldiers. Now, with better equipment, superior knowledge of the terrain, and months of combat experience, he liked their chances. The aliens had made a fatal mistake in their invasion planning. They had assumed that destroying human cities and governments would end all resistance. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous, an enemy that had nothing left to lose and everything to learn from defeating them. The real war was just beginning. Commander Veltar stared at the emergency report displayed on his screen, reading it for the third time because he could not believe what it said. The data had come from their deep space monitoring stations, intercepting military communications from the Korthak Dominion. What he was seeing should have been impossible. "Lieutenant Kesra, bring me every piece of information we have about the third planet in System Sol 3847, he ordered, his voice tight with disbelief. Kesra hurried to her workstation and pulled up the old files. "Sir, that is the primitive world we dismissed 3 years ago. The one with the mammals that had just discovered radio signals. Why do you need information about them?" "Because according to these intercepted Korthak reports, those primitive mammals are winning a war against one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy." The silence in the command center was complete. Every Zephyrian officer stopped what they were doing and turned to look at their commander. In 3,000 years of galactic observation, no species had ever successfully resisted a Korthak invasion. The Dominion had conquered hundreds of worlds, and every single one had surrendered within days of the initial attack. "That cannot be correct, sir," Kesra said carefully. "Our reports showed those creatures were barely past the Stone Age. They had no advanced weapons, no unified government, no space travel. How could they possibly fight the Korthak?" Veltar transferred the intercepted communications to the main display screen. "See for yourself. These are official Korthak military reports, sent directly to their high command. They are requesting additional fleets, more troops, and new weapons specifically designed for what they are calling asymmetric warfare against adaptive enemies." The officers gathered around the display, reading the alien text with growing amazement. The reports told an incredible story. The human species had not only survived the initial bombardment that destroyed their major cities, but had organized into resistance groups that were actively hunting Korthak forces. Listen to this, Veltar continued, reading from one report. The enemy demonstrates unprecedented ability to reverse engineer captured technology. Human fighters are now using modified versions of our own weapons against us. Casualties among ground forces have reached unacceptable levels. Request immediate reinforcement of Sector Sol 3847. Dr. Zethrin, the chief xenobiologist, pushed through the crowd of officers to examine the data more closely. Commander, this contradicts everything we know about species development patterns. No civilization has ever shown this kind of adaptive capacity under extreme stress. Most species collapse completely when their infrastructure is destroyed. Apparently these humans are different, Veltar replied grimly. Look at this casualty report from 2 months ago. A single human resistance cell destroyed an entire Korthak supply convoy and killed 4 to 7 soldiers. The survivors reported that the humans had somehow learned to predict patrol routes and set up perfect ambushes. More reports flowed across the screen, each one more shocking than the last. Humans had learned to capture and operate Korthak vehicles. They had figured out how to jam alien communications. They had even begun manufacturing crude copies of advanced weapons using primitive tools and salvaged materials. Sir, Kesra said quietly, there is something else. Our long-range sensors are detecting unusual energy signatures from the Sol system. It looks like someone is broadcasting on multiple frequencies across interstellar space. Show me, Veltar ordered. The communications array locked onto the signal, and suddenly the command center was filled with a human voice speaking in clear, determined tones. The translation computer quickly converted the alien language into Zephyrian. This is James Mitchell, speaking for the free humans of Earth. We know you are out there, watching. We know you think conquest is inevitable, that resistance is futile. But you are wrong. Every officer in the command center stood frozen, listening to words that no species had ever spoken before. In the entire recorded history of the galaxy, no conquered world had ever broadcast a message of defiance to the stars. We are humanity. We do not surrender. We do not break. We adapt, we overcome, and we remember every lesson you teach us. 3 years ago, the Korthak Dominion thought they could erase us from existence. They destroyed our cities, killed billions of our people, and expected us to bow down in defeat. The human's voice grew stronger, filled with a kind of fierce pride that the Zephyrians had never heard from any species. Instead, we learned from them. We studied their weapons, copied their technology, and turned their own tools against them. Today, human resistance fighters control more territory on Earth than the Korthak occupying forces. We have captured their ships, defeated their armies, and proven that no species in this galaxy is invincible. Dr. Zethrin was frantically taking notes, his scientific mind racing to understand what he was witnessing. Commander, this is unprecedented. This species is not following any known pattern of development or behavior. They are creating something entirely new. The broadcast continued, reaching across the galaxy to touch the senses of dozens of different civilizations. On worlds that had been conquered by the Korthak centuries ago, enslaved populations heard the impossible message of successful resistance. On independent worlds that lived in fear of Dominion expansion, leaders began to wonder if the humans might offer a new hope for freedom. To any species listening, James Mitchell's voice rang out across the stars, Earth stands free, and we are not alone in this galaxy anymore. If you are tired of bowing to tyrants, if you dream of fighting back against oppression, remember this day. Remember that somewhere in the darkness, humans are proving that even the mightiest empire can bleed. The transmission ended, leaving the Zephyrian command center in stunned silence. For the first time in their recorded history, they had discovered something that their science could not explain and their experience could not predict. Commander Veltar looked around at his officers, seeing his own thoughts reflected in their faces. The galaxy would never be the same. The age of predictable conquests and inevitable surrenders was over. Humanity had changed the rules of galactic civilization forever.